Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, many people have been calling for the Bute House Agreement to be, put aside, to be destroyed, and for the Greens to be thrown out of government for the betterment of just about everyone. And we've seen this week how there's been infighting, resignations, people calling for Ross Greer's head because he's got a big gob and a very small brain and he's childlike. You got the madness of their policies coming to bite them on every single front. You got Jeffrey threatening councils. You have the imp crying about heat pumps that nobody wants. And generally everyone is fed up with them. A lot of backbenchers in the SNP think they need to go because it's going to cost them their seats. And even some of the bigger names like Fergus Ewing are out there. A lone voice in the wilderness because he's one of the few calling for it openly, saying it's time for them to go. Well, Fergus has been joined in his chorus by what we consider as a good friend of Fergus's. This person, of course, is Kate Forbes. She too is now saying the time of the Bute House Agreement is over, and unless they ditch it now, the SNP is finished at the next Holyrood elections. But does Humza Yousaf have the balls to fire them? I think not. Kendall is too scared. Let's have a look at this. Right, before I get into it, I would ask that about the 35% of you who are subscribed, and my regular viewers have subscribed, but the other 65% of you regulars, please do consider subscribing. Your subscription massively helps the channel. We get pushed down because we're political, and every time you subscribe, it makes our voice a little bit louder, and it pushes the message out there. And the message is that the SNP are so very damaging. So do please consider hitting that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit the like button. That also really helps. The end of that message. Let's have a look at this. Kate Forbes, obviously previous contender for leadership and may yet be the next leader. Who knows? She's demanding that the SNP axe the Bute House Agreement and to get rid of the Scottish Greens in a bombshell intervention. Now, of course, she's always been very closely aligned with Fergus Ewing. They have a lot in common in terms of constituencies, both rural, remote, and a long way away, of course, from the central belt. And they both have a very similar view on the Greens, that they loathe the Greens and they loathe the Green policies. And of course, for Kate, I will also say she has a very strong religious aspect to her makeup. And so sharing a platform with the likes of Maggie Chapman is anathema to her. Not because of Maggie Chapman's, sexuality, but simply for the calls and the things that Maggie Chapman wants to impose on society. But anyway, the SNP leadership contender has ratcheted up pressure on Humza Yousaf to axe Lorna Slater and Patrick Harvey, and all of them, from his government amid a decline in support for the nationalists. Well, yeah, because they're aligning themselves to even more extremists. I mean, the nationalists are extremists anyway. They're left-wing extremists. But they are even more, maligned, shall we say, by having effectively eco-Marxists with them on that platform who would willingly destroy the entire economy to prove a point. And it would make no difference whatsoever. And people are being alienated to this, especially when they're told that their livelihoods, their homes, everything, their wealth is being systemically destroyed if the Greens get their way. And so they're losing all their support. And of course, this transcribes across from the Greens to the SNP and the whole shebang. And so, yes, it isn't just Fergus Ewing and Kate Forbes. There's a lot of backbenchers very deeply worried about the Bute House Agreement. Anyway, former SNP leadership contender Kate Forbes has urged her party to axe the Bute House Agreement and ditch the Scottish Greens in order to save themselves from, and they've just put from disaster, I will put from utter and sheer and total disaster. It is a bombshell intervention from a senior nationalist politician and piles huge pressure on Humza Yousaf. But he's like Superman. He folds very, very quickly, She becomes the most high-profile SNP MSP to make the demand, following in the footsteps of her very good friend, veteran Fergus Ewing. Others within the Holyrood group are also understood to be frustrated about the actions of their government partners. That's because the government partners are totally and completely bonkers, to the point of dangerously so. Miss Forbes has called for the agreement to be reviewed as she competed to be the next First Minister, but stopped short of demanding that it be completely scrapped. That was during the during the competition, as it were. But she's now called on Mr Yousaf to operate a minority government as he is pushing policies that are unpopular with the public just to appease the Scottish Greens. Yeah, the little green tail is wagging the yellow dog. And in fact, what you have in reality in Scotland is a Green government propped up by very weakly led SNP. Basically, they're slave class, isn't it? You will do as we will say. Oh yes, we will. Because he hasn't got the balls to say no. He's an arse, isn't he? Anyway, the likes of the highly protected marine areas, the deposit return scheme and the banning of gas boilers were all part of the Bute House Agreement, as well as the gender bill, and have proven to be divisive with Scots. The first two were axed to the great fanfare, while the last one has been scathingly criticised and will also be axed. It won't come in. Whoever wins the next election, breaking news, Labour, will undoubtedly scrap that idea because it is completely unworkable, and everybody knows it will fail because it will destroy the entire economy to achieve absolutely nothing. It will achieve nothing, and yet it will destroy everything. Speaking to the New Statesman, Mr. Forbes, they're asking her husband. No, I think they mean Miss Forbes, but that's the state of journalism today. Miss Forbes pointed out that the SNP, let's call her Kate, the delightful and fragrant Kate. We all know how I feel about her. Not her politics, of course, I just think she's nice. Anyway, Miss Forbes pointed out that the SNP's momentum has stalled in the last year. No, that's an understatement by a long mark, isn't it? But support for independence has remained the same. Yes, a minority view. Well done, Kate. You're getting it. She said, we have lost the perception. Actually, you could just finish that sentence after the word lost, couldn't you? But anyway, we have lost the perception of being a broad movement moving together towards something bigger. Independence. That's something smaller. That's something destructive. That's something you don't want to be anywhere near. People have left the party. We keep having to ditch or rework major policies for good reason, but not without political or financial cost. She called on the Greens partnership to be repealed because they are a different party to the SNP, and we want more distinctive and progressive policies. Well, you haven't got any policies. Every policy you have is a Green policy. The former finance secretary, who salted away about $3 billion that nobody knows where it is, that's something we need to be questioning her on, said we were elected on an SNP manifesto, not a Green Party manifesto or the Bute House Agreement. Nearly all the issues that have lost the support in the last year are found in the Bute House Agreement and not in the SNP manifesto. That's only because you haven't presented anything in the SNP manifesto yet. Everything you've done has been Greens. And that's why everything has failed, of course, because the Greens are pretty dim. I see it as particularly acutely with the economy and in rural Scotland, as the Greens appear to want to overregulate rural communities out of existence and hike taxes to a rate that will ultimately reduce the public revenue. That is despite the cost of living crisis hitting our economy and the rural sector particularly hard, because that's all the Greens know. Destroy, destroy, destroy. They don't want to save anything. They call themselves the Greens and try to present themselves as virtuous and the messiah of the world, but they're actually one of the most malign, malignant, destructive forces on the planet. The SNP have consistently won elections because the Scottish people felt we were on their side. During any crisis, from the 2008 crash to the present cost of living, the SNP prioritised efforts to fire up the economy and support households right across Scotland. I'd like to see the citations for that, because poverty in Scotland has increased every year since you've come to power, love. Let's not, live in your fantasy world. Let's get back to real street, Anyway, she said the SNP wins votes from the north to the south of Scotland when the people trust us to focus more on their needs than on empty ideology. Independence is empty ideology. It's never going to happen. And yet you keep pushing it and wasting millions and billions over the years on it. And what have you got to show for it? Nothing. How about not wasting billions on it and being in the same position you're in now, but with a better Scotland? If you had a better Scotland, you might even get more people voting for you. You might get your independence. But while you continue to destroy Scotland, people are going, no, we don't trust you. Anyway, In her damning conclusion, she pointed out that the Greens only have a handful of politicians, and none of them from constituencies, all of them on the list, and that none of them should be in government. There should be a rule in place, in fact, that no minister can be appointed a minister unless they are a constituency MSP. You can have them in there for the vote and they can have the right to speak, but they cannot be part of a government from a list. They have to be a constituency MSP to be in the government. I think that would end a lot of the problems. She said their influence should be proportional to the public support for their policies. She added that they do not chime with the public priorities during a cost of living crisis, or indeed ever. The Scottish Tories welcomed Miss Forbes' comments, but said they were simply empty words until she actually took action and pointed out that the toxic Greens are disastrous for the country. Craig Hoy added, Humza Yousaf is too obsessed with independence to recognise that the anti-growth Greens have no place in government and are certainly not worth their weight in gold, as he ludicrously tried to claim. He's absolutely right. And there we go. Well done, Kate. You got something right. You're on the right side of this argument. The wrong side of other things, but I'll give you this one. And it doesn't stop me fancying you. Anyway, I shall round off and come up. Now, I've got to say, from a purely personal basis, I love the Greens being in government. When it comes to making videos, those guys are comedy gold, and they have so much to give. Every day there's something about it, well, either one of them or all of them or whatever. They are worth their weight in gold to me. But to live under them must be truly, truly awful. The only sort of saving grace is that none of their policies will ever come to see the light of day, because they're all so amazingly bad and stupid and wrong that you're quite safe that it won't do. And whatever happens at the next election, they're gone and they will never be back. People have seen how mad and bad it is to have the Greens in power, that they're like, never again, done, fine, bye. And that change, they need to make that change, that only ministers can only be constituency MSPs, and that will stop the madness forever, won't it? It will stop the extremists like the Imp and Jeffrey ever getting their little grubby protuberances onto the levers of power. But Kate's right, I'll grant her that. Like I say, she's not right on everything, but she's right on this, and her and Fergus can stand arm in arm, linked and joyous as one, in the fact that they are, on this occasion, on the side of the angels. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do keep an eye out for the next video. We've got an NHS one coming up, and then we've got a nice little Jenny Gilruth coming up as well. You won't want to miss them, so do hit the subscribe button, and I will speak to you later. Bye. And that's my dog. Somebody's walked past. Bye.